The rain had just stopped when my front door decided to become a suggestion instead of a barrier, and the sound it made, that sharp crack of wood splitting right around the lock, was the kind of sound that turns your stomach into ice because you don't need to guess who did it. I shoved a kitchen chair under the knob, pressed my palm against it, like that would magically make it stronger, and told my daughter Lily bedroom. Right now, and she looked at me with those big eyes that were way too old for a 5-year-old, and whispered, "Is he coming back?" And I lied, because that's what you do when you're a single mom at midnight with a broken door and no backup. I said, "No, baby, we're fine," even though my whole body was listening for footsteps on the porch, even though my throat tasted like panic, even though the truth was, I didn't feel fine at all. Then, when I finally got Lily tucked under her blanket, and I sat on the floor outside her room with my back against the wall like a human lock, I heard a soft knock again, and my heart slammed so hard I thought it might actually bruise. I crept to the door, pulled it open 2 inches, and there was my child on my porch, holding hands with the man next door, like she'd just brought home a stray puppy. Except this puppy was Miles Carter, the billionaire tech CEO everyone in town knew by name, standing there in a damp suit jacket, with his tie loosened, looking tired in that expensive, controlled way rich men can look tired. And Lily pointed at my cracked doorframe and announced, "Oh, it doesn't close. Mommy was crying, and you look strong, so I asked you to fix it." And my brain didn't even have time to react before my body was already moving, scooping her up, checking her head and shoulders like I could undo what she'd done, whispering, "Oh my God, Lily, you can't do that." And she patted my cheek like she was the adult and said, "But you were scared, and yeah, that happened. I wanted the porch to swallow me. I wanted the night to rewind. I wanted to pretend we were the kind of family where the door never breaks, and the mom never cries, and the child never learns what fear sounds like through drywall. But we weren't that family, not anymore. Not since my ex decided he had the right to show up when it suited him, and remind me exactly where he thought I belonged. Miles didn't look amused. He didn't look annoyed. He didn't do that thing people do where they act like your problems are messy and contagious. He just looked at Lily and said, "You did the right thing then." He looked at me and introduced himself like we were equals, Miles Carter. I'm next door, and I forced a nod, like I hadn't seen his name on half the town's headlines, like I hadn't watched people whisper about him at the diner, where I waitressed, like he wasn't the guy who bought the big house on Brookstone Lane and kept it lit up like a lighthouse while the rest of us lived with porch bulbs that flickered when the wind changed. I tried to shut it down fast, because pride is funny that way. It'll protect you even when you're bleeding. "It's late. I'm sorry. We're fine. It's just the lock." And I could hear how pathetic that sounded, even as I said it, because my doorframe was split like a wound, and a chair was jammed under the knob like a cartoon defense, and Miles just crouched down and ran his fingers along the splintered wood, his jaw tightening, his eyes going sharp, and he said quietly, "Someone kicked this in," like he already knew the answer, but wanted me to name it. I swallowed, glanced at Lily, lowered my voice. My ex and Miles's expression shifted in a way I can't fully explain. Not pity, not rage for show, just this solid, steady kind of anger, like a man who doesn't tolerate cruelty, and he asked, "Did you call the police?" And I hate that question, because it sounds simple to people who've never had to calculate survival like math. So I said the truth, the ugly truth. If I call the police and it turns into a domestic incident, my landlord could evict us. He's been looking for an excuse, and I waited for the judgment, because that's usually where people judge you right there. They decide you're irresponsible or weak or dramatic. They decide you made choices you didn't have. But Miles just nodded once, like he heard me, like he understood the kind of fear that doesn't come from the man outside but from the system inside. And he said, "Okay. Then we're going to make sure you can sleep tonight." And before I could argue, he was already walking back to his house. It took him 5 minutes to return with a toolbox that looked like it had never been used, which made me almost laugh through my shaking, because of course he had every tool money could buy, and none of the life that made you use it. You know what I mean? He worked quietly while Lily curled up on the couch with her stuffed bunny still half awake watching him, like he was a superhero on late-night TV, and I stood there uselessly offering to help, and Miles said, "Hold the flashlight," like he was giving me a job, so I wouldn't feel like a charity case. He pulled off the damaged trim, drove long screws deep into the studs, reinforced the frame with a metal strike plate, and every time the drill whined, I felt something loosen in my chest, because that sound meant someone was doing something, not just telling me to be careful or stay strong, actually doing something. When he finished, he tested the door twice, then stepped back and nodded at me, and I closed it, turned the lock, and it clicked solid, clean, real, and my eyes burned so fast, it felt like humiliation. But it was relief, too. Real relief, the kind that makes your body remember it's allowed to breathe. I whispered, "Thank you," and he didn't do a victory speech. He didn't do a smug smile. He just said, "You're welcome." And then, like it was the most normal thing in the world, he added, "Tomorrow morning I can have someone install a better lock and a camera." And my pride snapped back to attention, because pride is a guard dog that bites the hand that feeds you. "I can't pay for that," I said, and Miles didn't flinch. "I'm not asking you to. My company literally builds security systems. This is easy." And I shook my head. "Why are you doing this?" And he looked past me at Lily asleep now. Cheeks still damp from tears, she pretended she didn't cry, and he said, "Because I've lived next door for 6 months, and I didn't even know you existed. And tonight, your kid knocked on my door like I was supposed to be part of this street." And then he paused, like the words surprised him. And maybe she was right. That line stayed with me because nobody ever says, "Maybe you're right" to a kid unless they actually mean it. At 9 the next morning, a crew showed up in a van with my address on a clipboard. Like my little rental mattered, like the woman inside it mattered, like the child inside it mattered. And they replaced the lock, reinforced the frame properly, installed a camera and a motion light. And when I tried to ask the woman in charge how much it cost, she smiled like I'd asked what time it was. "It's handled." And that phrase hit me like a punch, because in my life, nothing is handled unless I handle it, unless I squeeze it into my hands until it bleeds, unless I sacrifice sleep and sanity, and maybe a little dignity too. That evening, Miles came by earlier than usual, and Lily opened the door like she'd been waiting all day. "Mr. Miles, come see." And she dragged him around, pointing at the camera and the lock and the light, like she was giving a tour of a museum exhibit titled, "How We Don't Get Scared Anymore." And I stood there trying to keep my face neutral, because I didn't want to cry in front of him again, but my voice came out sharp anyway. "This is too much," and he said gently. "It's not," and I said, "You don't even know us," and he looked at me like he could see the exhaustion stitched into my bones. "I know enough," he said. And then, because my stomach was growling, and Lily had already decided he was family, I invited him to stay for dinner, and it was spaghetti from a jar, and garlic bread from a bag, and the kind of meal people online make fun of. But it was warm, and it was ours. Lily talked nonstop about daycare and her best friend and how the camera was going to catch bad guys, and Miles listened, like her words mattered, and then she ran off to grab a crayon drawing she'd made of 2 houses, one with bright yellow windows and a stick figure, man with a big smile, and she handed it to Miles and said, "That's you." And he stared at it like it was art in a gallery, and he said, "This might be the best gift I've gotten in years." And I watched his throat work, like he was swallowing something heavier than emotion. And suddenly I understood the kind of loneliness that can live inside a big house. Over the next few weeks, Miles started showing up in this steady, inconveniently kind way that made my brain keep waiting for the catch. He'd bring takeout and claim he ordered too much. He'd fix little things like a stuck window or a leaky faucet, like it was nothing. He'd sit on the floor and play with Lily and let her boss him around, and he'd ask me questions that weren't nosy, just human, like, "How was your shift?" and "Did you eat today?" and "When do you sleep?" And I hated how much those questions made me feel seen, because being seen can feel dangerous when you've spent years trying to be invisible so nobody targets you. People at the diner noticed, of course they did, and one woman smirked and said, "Well, look at you, like my safety was a prize I'd won by being cute." And another said, "Be careful, men like that don't do favors for free," and I wanted to slam a coffee pot down and scream. You think I asked for any of this? You think I wanted my kid to be scared in her own house? But I didn't. I kept my head down and went back to wiping tables, because when you're broke, you learn fast that other people are always ready to write a story about you, and it's rarely kind. One night on the porch while Lily slept, I admitted something I usually kept buried. I was in nursing school. I said I have 1 year left, maybe a little more, but I can't afford to go back. I can barely afford daycare. And Miles didn't say the thing rich people say when they want to feel heroic. He didn't say, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." He just leaned forward and asked, "What if I help in a way that doesn't make you feel owned?" And I laughed bitterly. "Is there a way?" And he said, "A loan, on paper. You finish. You get stable hours and real pay. You pay me back over time. I'm not buying you Jenna." And that made me freeze because it was like he could hear the fear I wasn't saying out loud. And he added quieter, "I'm investing in you," and I said, "I don't want to owe you." And Miles met my eyes and said, "Then don't owe me. Partner with me. I want you to win," and I swear to God, nobody had said that to me in years without a wink, without a condition, without a punchline. I said I'd think about it. And for the first time in a long time, thinking about my future didn't feel like a cruel joke. I re-enrolled. Miles paid the fees. As a loan got me a tutor for the classes I was rusty on, and adjusted his work schedule so he could be home earlier to watch Lily when I had evening labs. And at first I told myself it was temporary, just a phase, just neighbor kindness that would fade, but it didn't fade. It got steadier. It got real. Lily started calling him Mr. Miles, then Miles. Then, one night she said, "Uncle Miles," like it was the most natural thing in the world. And I felt this weird panic rise because labels make things permanent. And I looked at him like, "Is that okay?" And he smiled a little rough around the edges, like it surprised him too. "It's an honor," he said. 6 months passed, and my life started to look like something I didn't recognize. Not perfect, not easy, but stable, like the ground wasn't crumbling under my feet every time I took a step. Lily moved to a better daycare. My grades were good. I slept more than 4 hours a night. I laughed, sometimes actual laughter, the kind that catches you off guard, because you forgot your body could do that. Then the twist hit right when I started believing we were safe. My phone buzzed with a motion alert, while Lily and I were outside planting cheap flowers in a plastic pot. And Miles was there too, crouched in the dirt in jeans, letting Lily lecture him about watering, gentle, not drowning. And I glanced at the screen and saw Travis walking up my porch, like the restraining order was a suggestion, like the camera was a joke, like my fear was still his favorite toy. My stomach went cold. Lily's little hand tightened around the watering can. Miles stood up, slow, calm, and I watched his whole posture change. Not aggressive, not dramatic, just solid, like a wall rising where a door used to be. Travis reached the yard and sneered. "Who the hell is this?" he said, pointing at Miles like Miles was furniture in his way. "Move. I'm here for my wife," and Miles's voice was level, almost bored. "She's not your wife," he said. "And you're trespassing," and Travis laughed that ugly laugh men laugh when they think they're untouchable. "You think because you bought her a lock, you own her now," rich boy playing hero, and I felt something snap into place inside me, something that had been building for months, because for once I wasn't alone. And for once I had proof, and for once my child wasn't the only light in the room. I stepped forward, lifted my phone so the camera could see my face, and I said loud and clear, "Travis, you're trespassing. I'm calling the police," and his smile wavered, "because bullies are brave until the lights come on, you know what I mean?" Travis leaned in, voice low like poison. "You really want to do this? You want to make trouble?" And I smiled, small but sharp, and said, "I'm not making trouble. I'm documenting it." And Miles didn't move an inch. He just looked at Travis and said, "You have 10 seconds to leave." And Travis's eyes flicked to the camera, then to the motion light, then to Lily hiding behind my leg, and you could see the calculation happening. Not remorse, never remorse, just risk. Travis spat on the ground, like a child muttered, "This isn't over," and backed away. And I pointed at the camera and said, "It is on video, though," and yeah, the satisfaction of saying that out loud was almost dizzying. Miles called the police anyway, even though Travis left, because he said she said is where women lose, and he knew it. And when the report was filed and the footage was saved, his legal team helped me tighten the protection order so the language was clear. Distance violations, immediate arrest. All the things I didn't have the money or knowledge to push for alone. And for the first time since my divorce, I slept without my body staying half awake, waiting. Now here's the part that might divide people, and I know the comments are going to explode because they always do. A couple weeks later, I found out Miles had quietly bought my rental house from my landlord. I didn't hear it from him. I heard it from my landlord's assistant, who called to say, "Your lease will be transferred to the new owner," like it was a grocery receipt, and my hands started shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone, because control is the thing. I've fought my whole adult life, and even kindness can look like control if it changes your world without your consent. I confronted Miles the second he got home, and my voice was tight. "Did you buy my house?" And he didn't play dumb. He didn't dodge, he nodded once. Yes, and I felt anger and gratitude crash into each other. "Why would you do that without telling me?" And he took a breath like he'd been ready for the hit because your landlord was going to raise rent and use the domestic incident as an excuse to push you out. I removed the threat, and I hated how much sense that made, and I hated even more that it made me feel safe, because safety shouldn't come with a power imbalance, right? I said, "I don't know how to accept help without feeling owned," and Miles's face softened. Not like a man trying to win, like a man trying to understand. "Then we do rules," he said, "everything in writing. Lease stays. Rent stays fair. You keep your choices. I'm not here to control you, Jenna. I'm here to stop you from getting punished for surviving." And I stood there with my arms wrapped around myself, trying to decide if this was love or a cage with prettier bars. Lily chose that exact moment to run in and announce, "Mommy, tell him he has to take his shoes off if he's going to be family." And Miles actually laughed, held up his hands and said, "Yes, ma'am." And something in my chest cracked open. Because kids don't care about status. They care about presence. They care about who shows up, who listens, who makes the scary things less scary. And that night after Lily went to bed, Miles and I sat on the porch under the motion light, and the camera, the same porch that used to feel like a stage for humiliation. And he said, "Can I ask you something?" And I said, "Sure." And he looked straight ahead like he needed courage. "Why did you let me in?" And I almost laughed because the answer was obvious. "Because my kid dragged you in," I said. But he shook his head. "No." "Why did you let me stay?" And I thought about it, really thought about it. And I said, "Because you didn't treat me like a mess." And Miles nodded slowly. And then he said, "Before Lily knocked on my door, I had everything people chase. And I felt nothing. I was alive on paper and dead in my house." And he turned to me, eyes serious. "Somewhere along the way, you stopped being the neighbor. You became my home." And my throat tightened because I didn't feel like I belonged in his world. And he said it anyway. "I love you." And the wild thing is, I believed him not because he was rich, not because he fixed a lock, but because he showed up on ordinary Tuesdays and bad Thursdays and the nights when Lily had nightmares, because he stayed consistent. And consistency is the rarest kind of romance there is. I told him the truth. "I love you too, and I'm terrified." And he nodded. Like that was fair. "We can go slow," he said. "But I want to be here. I want to be family, for real." And I let myself breathe in that word family, because for years it had felt like something other people got to have. So yeah, that's my story. A broken door, a little girl who went looking for light, a neighbor who showed up at midnight with tools he'd never used, and an ex who finally learned that intimidation doesn't work when the cameras are on and the fear has witnesses. But I want to know what you think, because this is where people always disagree, and honestly, I get both sides. Was Miles a hero for buying the house to protect us from eviction? Or did he cross a line by using money to change the ground under my feet without asking first? If you were in my shoes, would you call that love? Or would you call that control with good intentions? And if you've ever been judged as trouble just for trying to stay safe, or if you've ever had to choose between your dignity and your survival, about it in the comments. I read more than you think, and I want to hear where you land on right versus wrong, on justice versus optics, and whether you believe people like me deserve peace without having to earn it through pain.